please silence all cell phones. If you did not have an opportunity to sign the register book upon entering the synagogue, I ask you to please do so at the conclusion of this service. For those traveling to the cemetery, please be sure to use your high beam headlights and four-way emergency flashers. Unfortunately, I was just informed the police will not be able to escort us to the cemetery today. However, we do have directions to the cemetery, and we will do our best to follow in procession going from the synagogue to Beth Emeth Memorial Park. But please do obey all traffic signs and signals. Immediately following the interment at the cemetery, all are invited to partake in a meal of condolence at the late residence, 17 Stonecrop Road in Wilmington. Shiva will be observed 6:30 p.m. this evening, also at the late residence. Shiva will also be observed 6:30 p.m. Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday evening at the home of Sue and Sion, 705 Chelton Hill Drive in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. And Sunday, Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday, not Saturday, thank you. Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. The following are designated as pallbearers: Matan Siegel, Tori Siegel, Leora Siegel, Eliana Siegel, Nancy Polikoff, Lou Brody, Beth Rudolfker, Donna Brody, and Marjorie Albee. Please maintain the seats here and now. At the conclusion of this service, we will call you forward.
Grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, be with them. For Harriet's love that united us in life, which death cannot sever, for her companionship that we shared along life's path, and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of her heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness, and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever-new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death.
There is a time for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for being uprooted, a time for destroying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for refraining from embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for tearing and a time for sowing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace.
The words of the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd," have brought comfort to untold numbers of generations. We recite the psalm now both in Hebrew and then in English. Adonai roi lo echsar birot asher yarbetzeini al mei menuchot al mei menuchot yanaleini nafshi yeshover yeshover yancheni b'maglei tzedek yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo kan kilich Adonai roi lo echsar.
Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. A mother of generations, a woman of valor. She is precious in the gifts that she has given to our family. Her children have found trust and truth in these gifts. We follow in patterns that she taught. She is robed in strength and dignity, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teachings of kindness are on her tongue. We benefit and learn from her wisdom. May she always be credited for the fruit of her labor and her achievements. May she live on in glory.
God, you give us loved ones and make them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you the stricken look for comfort and the sorrow-laden for consolation. O God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures as you, O God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. As we pause for silent prayer, I invite us to hold on to a memory that we've been thinking of Harriet and the joy she brought to our lives. I invite you to join me responsively. I'll show you what I mean. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember her. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember her. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of the sun, we remember her. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember her. So long as we live, she too shall live, for she is now a part of us as we remember her. At this time, I would like to call up Harriet's grandchildren, Matan, Leora, and Eliana, to share words. following will be Cousin Nancy. Want to go one at a time? Great.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. It means the world to us. On her final day, Grams asked me specifically that we celebrate her life today. I'd like to begin by sharing some words from her 90th birthday party. Grams, I'm so grateful for the warmth and positivity you share with everyone in your life. There's no one I'd rather share and celebrate good news with. I appreciate how you've welcomed my wife, Tori, into our family, and love that we have Pop-Up's chair at home in our apartment. I look back fondly on visits to Wilmington growing up. Grams and Pop-Up always spoiled me with surprise presents, cable TV, and not kosher food. I've grown to better understand and admire the life and home they built together, seeing their professional careers through to retirement, then traveling and cruising around the world. You're the definition of a life well lived, and I hope to follow that example you've set for us. We love you, Grams. Tori and I got to talk to her for a while on Saturday morning. She was sound of mind until the end. It was her choice to go, and she was proud of her experience here with us. She lived many lives and eras in her time with us, as a wife to Jerry, a mother to Susan, Stephen, and Michael, a mother-in-law to Sion, a grandmother to myself, Leora, Eliana, and now my wife, Tori. And then after my Pop-Up passed away, her second independence, alongside her friend Roslyn, training with Jeff, volunteering, and continued education, she made the most of those years. We're so grateful she could share our wedding day this past October 4th. She was able to join my family on the dance floor for the Beatles' Here Comes the Sun. I told her I appreciated the rare and beautiful opportunity for closure and thanked her for staying with us. She went peacefully surrounded by family under her own wishes with steadfast conviction. I told her Pop-Up would be waiting to see you with a full head of hair. She was the sweetest woman you'd meet. She was always on your side, and to know her is to love her. She was always well-dressed, well put together, nails done, hair done, with jewelry, pride in her appearance, and detail-oriented. I remember growing up, her and Pop-Up would be up at 5 in the morning making oatmeal with cinnamon sugar, and she'd always be wearing her long red robe. She'll be survived by her famous brisket, branzino, and brown edge cookie recipes. She loved the Philadelphia Orchestra and the Kimmel. And on the rare occasions I disappointed her, she always addressed me directly. In my head, she was also a famous complainer. Everywhere was too loud and too cold. And I personally think she might have passed this down to me because I too love complaining. Her and Pop-Up bought me my first car after I graduated Pittsburgh, and they joined us there in 2011. Over the past several years, in lieu of birthday, holiday, and Mother's Day gifts, Grams opted for charitable donations instead, generating support for Planned Parenthood, Magen David Adom, and the Hostages and Missing Families Forum. She was a standout woman. I'll cherish the time we had together. Zikronan livracha, may her memory be a blessing. Thank you.
And now we invite up Leora and Eliana. Do you want to? Do you have more room?
Hi, thank you for everyone being here. I'm Leora.
Eliana.
Yeah. So Grams loved her grandchildren fiercely, and she made it known to us and everybody else that she knew. She knew how to make each of us feel special, referring to us as her favorite oldest granddaughter, her favorite youngest granddaughter, and her favorite grandson. She was always there for us, not only in big moments, but also for the smaller occasions. She and our pop-up were always in the audience with a big smile and a bouquet of flowers for each of our preschool graduations, dance recitals, choir, band concerts, musicals, and every elementary school Grandparents' Day.
Grams attended Leora's graduation from U of D in Temple. As Matan said, she and Pup-Up traveled all the way to Pittsburgh for his graduation and all the way to Virginia for mine. Grams and Pup-Up came to every single visiting day at Camp Ramah, driving all the way to the northern Pocono Mountains just to spend a few hours with us grandkids and bring our favorite treats. Grams became famous amongst all our camp friends for her brown edge cookies and peach cake.
Our pop-up had the reputation of being the funny one, but to us, Grams was often hilarious, even if it was unintentional. She also had a great sense of humor and would light up when we would make jokes. Even in her last days, especially when we would make a joke quoting Pup-Up, she would light up with a huge smile. Many of us know that Grams could be quite particular and liked things to be a very specific way, the Grams way. We knew the exact minuscule serving size of food to serve her, to give her the crispiest bites of roasted veggies and potatoes, and the corner pieces of cakes and kugels. We knew how to make her cocktail just right, water with no ice, mixed with tonic water and a splash of Propel or lemon.
When helping to set the table for holiday meals, we always had to use the real silver utensils. On one occasion, she made Leora and I change the tablecloth no less than 3 times before we finally found the right one. Afterwards, we knew to hang the unused tablecloths back on their hangers, back in their garment bags, and back in the closet, because God forbid someone see a crease in a tablecloth. During her hospitalization back in October, she would sit in her hospital bed and direct us on how her flower bouquets should be arranged, because the florist didn't get it right. Move the carnation to the middle, the tulip to the back, the rose to the side. And though we sometimes rolled our eyes, we were always happy to do it for our Grams.
If you couldn't tell from the stories Eliana just told, Grams loved the finer things in life. She filled her years with world travel, like Matan said, concerts at the Philadelphia Orchestra, Broadway shows, Delaware Theater, and of course a good mani-pedi. She was like a celebrity at her hair and nail salons. And while she cared deeply about how she presented herself each day, we were so lucky to share simpler moments with Grams as well. As kids, we would have sleepovers at Grams and Pup-Up's house and cuddle up with her wearing her long red or pink robe that zipped from her ankles all the way to her neck, because she was always freezing, which I share with her. She would read us stories as she lay on her silk pillowcase before they were trendy. Despite her fancier tendencies, those mornings were low-key, and Grams was not above reheating her coffee in the microwave several times before she got through the mug.
Grams was extremely strong, both in her beliefs and values, and physically. Many of you know that she strongly supported civil rights, women's rights, as a proud lifelong donor to Planned Parenthood and LGBTQ rights. She took pride in being active in Biden's political campaigns from his early days in the Delaware Congress. Grams' personal trainer, turned into dear friend Jeff, came to Grams' house 3 times a week, up until very recently. We would often compare how long we could hold our planks, and she would often beat our times.
Grams was one of the most generous and thoughtful people. She made sure to learn everybody's name so she could schmooze, and she was charming her nurses and techs in the hospital until her final days. She took great pride in her volunteer work at Nemours as one of the founders of the Read Aloud program and morning coffee cart. When I worked as a teacher in Ecuador in 2014, Grams took time to figure out how to use Skype so that she could teach my 6th grade students Holocaust education by sharing Pup-Up's story being a liberator.
Grams was a dedicated friend and took her friendships very seriously. In a recent conversation, she spoke with Leora and I about the difference between her friends and people who were just acquaintances. To Grams, the word friend was sacred. I feel so honored that during that conversation, Grams told Leora and me that she counted us as friends, not just her favorite granddaughters.
We were so lucky to have earned Grams' trust, confiding in us about things that she typically would keep private and close to the chest. We were even more lucky that she was with us until 93 years, almost 94. Graham shared that she felt that she lived a long and fulfilled life, and she wanted us to carry on her legacy by continuing our love of travel, music, and quality time with friends and family. We'll miss her greatly.
Cousin Nancy? You can pick wherever you want to speak with. And Sue, will you be speaking? Will Sue be speaking? You guys speak.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm Nancy Polikoff, and Harriet was my first cousin. There were 4 of us in my generation, and Harriet was predeceased by her sister Joy, whose daughter Debbie is here, and by Victor Polikoff, whose daughter Margie is here. So that leaves me to carry on the legacy of this family. They were the children of 3 brothers, and Nat, Martin, and my father Harry, who in turn were raised by immigrant parents, a father fleeing the pogroms, a mother brought here as a young child by her mother for a better life. We carry on the legacy of all of those forebears. There's one other person in our generation, and that's my brother Stan, not the child of any of those 3 men, but the stepson of my father, Harry, who joined our family when my father married his mother. He was 15 at the time. To Harriet, he was a relative. And to my brother, she was a relative. Harriet didn't need the formality of blood or definitions. Love came to her based on the relationships that she had with all of us. She didn't need the formality of law either. Long before same-sex couples could marry, she considered my former partner a member of our family, along with my adopted daughter. And then when I did marry, she always welcomed Cheryl into the family. It would never have occurred to her to do anything else. And she attended Cheryl's memorial service now almost 6 years ago, as she attended the happy occasions in our lives. My 50th birthday was certainly one of those. And I have a photograph of her on my 50th birthday in Hawaii, helping me pick out the beautiful necklace of a Nihau shell that will always be my greatest possession because it represents the love of so many people who contributed to it, including Harriet. My first memory of Harriet goes back to when I was about 12, I think. Obviously, I knew her before then, but memories being what they are, this is the one I have as my first. And it was special because I went to visit her and Jerry and their 3 what seemed to be at the time very little children, who I seemed much older than, which isn't exactly how it looks right now, is it? But at the time, I felt so special. And Harriet treated me very special because I was so much older. In fact, she made a point of getting a babysitter so that I could go to the movies with them. and leave the little children at home. And that was a very special time for me with them, and the first of many really special occasions that went on over many years, including many Thanksgivings we spent together. And then when I was retired and could no longer tolerate the cold of winter and started going to Southern California long before Thanksgiving, she came up with the idea that we would just do early Thanksgiving at her house, and all the family would gather there for what first started out being Thanksgiving dinner, and then I think I asked that it be changed to the equivalent of Sunday brunch. But we would do that every year, and that was my opportunity to still have a connection to her and to everybody in the family on special occasions. I also talked to Harriet on the day she died, and she could not have been any clearer. She was ready to die today. She said, "I want to die today." And I don't know how she made that happen, but she did, and I'm very happy for her that she got what she wanted on that day. Very happy for us that we will always have the memories of her in our lives. I try to practice the belief that the people who have left us aren't completely gone, and that the love they gave us stays with us forever. And that is what I will most remember about my cousin Harriet.
And lastly, I'll invite up Sion and Sue when they're ready. Sue, if you'd rather sit, you can sit.
Last night, Sue and I sat together, Sue thinking about... Okay. Can't hear you. Okay. Thinking about the essence of what she would like to express, and knew she wouldn't be up to expressing the words herself, so she asked me to share them with you. I will try and skip over the things that our children and Nancy already have mentioned, because we all knew her so well. She was social, outgoing, had a special way of connecting with people, family, extended family, friends, people they met on their travels, old friends dating back to childhood, her hairdresser, the manicurist, her doctors, their office staff, and most recently the staff at 501. Even though she was reluctant to be there and shared that with us and other friends of hers, the staff didn't have a clue. She was so positive and gracious with them, and when we went to pick some things up yesterday, we saw her young occupational therapist in the parking lot, and she started to cry. Now, bear in mind, she'd only been there barely 3 months. She said, all of us were crying when we heard. We loved Harriet. And she said last time they saw Harriet, they discussed nails. She pointed out to the two of them that their rings needed cleaning. And she shared her opinion of the latest episode of Bridgerton, which she'd watched the previous midnight. She said that her colleague had mentioned on Monday morning, you know what, I cleaned my ring over the weekend because of Harriet. While she was very proud of Sue and my professional accomplishments, clearly our biggest contribution to the world was her grandchildren. As she survived aunts, uncles, and older cousins passing, she became the much beloved matriarch of the family. Sue's parents always showed up for all events, celebrations, and tough times alike. They loved entertaining. Their home was always open to friends and family alike, a value that we share and are happy to see continuing with our children. Despite her devotion to Jerry and the sadness that she always felt since his loss 13 years ago, she continued to run their home with fierce independence and to continue to find ways to give back to the community through her volunteering, always interested in increasing her learning and education through OSHA classes, voracious reading, and keeping up with the news. Continued to enjoy cultural pursuits like the Philadelphia Orchestra, good food, and especially her Delaware theater group, some of whom are here, and was not below enjoying a good series on Netflix or public television. I'd like to share a few words of Torah. This week, as we mark the conclusion of Harriet's life, we also read the conclusion of the book of Exodus in the annual Torah cycle. The Parsha details the completion of the Mishkan, the desert tabernacle. It lists in great detail its appearance, the ornaments, the decorations, and tells us that when the work was complete, God's presence filled the Mishkan. The rabbis talk about how the Torah describes how God's presence dwelled within them, betocham, rather than within it, betocho, to teach us that God's presence is here when the community come together. As we all know, Harriet was quite meticulous about her jewelry, her hair, her nails, her appearance, the appearance of her house. Everything had to be just so. But that created the vessel in which community came together. Always creating connections that would welcome the holy presence and spirit that bonds us together. And now I apologize in advance for this, but since we were all reflecting and talking about how Harriet did things on her terms and up to the end did it her way, the lyrics are stuck in my head, so I'm going to paraphrase them slightly. And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain today. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certainly certain. I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this. I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, I'm private, I'm not going to tell you about them. I did what I had to do and saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when you all thought I bit off more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spat it out. I faced it all, and I stood as tall as she could and did it my way. I've loved, I've laughed and cried. I've had my fill, my share of losing. And now, as tears subside, I find it all so amusing, and those final memories of those rice smiles in the hospital, still having her sense of humor to the end. To think I did all that, and may I say not in a shy way. Oh no, oh no, not me. Yes, Harriet, you did it your way. And we're very happy after consideration to invite you all back to 17 Stonecrop Road, where all of the happy and sad events were celebrated. And don't worry, Harriet, we know part of the stuff's moved out, but Sue and her friend Lib did a heroic task yesterday. Trust us, the house looks beautiful, just like you'd want it. And don't worry, Sue knows how to find the right serving implements without you pointing out where they are.
Hard to follow that. Now, my colleague and co-clergy, Rabbi Robinson, could not be here today because he is out of town, and our Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Peter Grumbacher, was unfortunately unable to make it as he is unwell, but I have remarks from both of these rabbis who cared deeply for Harriet. First, the words from Rabbi Robinson. First and foremost, my most profound condolences to Harriet's family, especially her children, their spouses, and their children. My hope is that you find comfort in this moment, surrounded by loved ones and the community that loved Harriet so well. This past autumn, we had our lifetime member service. I'm smiling because I remember it. There were many people in attendance proud of their years of commitment to Congregation Beth Emeth, but no one was as full of joy to be there as Harriet. She took tremendous satisfaction in her longevity at this congregation, which did not mean that she was a traditionalist. Hers was one of the clearest and strongest voices advocating for the adoption of the new Machzor just a couple of years ago, Mishkan HaNefesh. In fact, Harriet's voice was clear and strong all of the time. She always had a perspective on what we should do and who we should be, and at least in my experience, she was almost always correct. And more than that, she backed those perspectives up with action, volunteering with her time in sisterhood and then in the ritual and choir committee, as well as also in the caring committee, literally until the past year. She was strong and independent, as we know, thoughtful and compassionate, and was a constant presence here at Beth Emeth. And she didn't only speak fiercely, she loved fiercely. Her friends, her beloved Jerry, who I know she missed terribly after his passing, and his children, and her children, and their grandchildren, over whom she quelled every time I spoke with her. This Shabbat, as we conclude the reading of the book of Shemot, of Exodus, we read that Moses ceased all of the work of building the Mishkan, the tabernacle, at which point the presence of Adonai, as promised, as we just heard, dwelt among the people. And it is in that moment that we recite the words that end every book of Torah. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and we will be strengthened. Let all of us, therefore, be strengthened by Harriet's memory. Again, may her loving family find comfort in this moment, and may she be remembered for blessing. Amen. The words of Rabbi Peter Grumbacher. I certainly didn't plan to miss this sad occasion. First of all, Harriet was among my favorite congregants, but more than that, I didn't plan on getting pneumonia. So my apologies, but I hope you will know from these words how I felt about her. In this week's Sedra, apologies, you're going to have 3 clergy in a row, and we're all quoting Torah, and so did Sion. So you're learning a lot today. That's not in his writing, that's mine. Okay. In this week's Sedra, Vayakel, we read about the elaborate fixings of the portable wilderness sanctuary called the Mishkan. These are but a few of those components. 3 layers of roof coverings, 48 gold-plated wall panels. Yes, I said portable. For though the elaborate nature of the Mishkan made for a very heavy schlep for those who had to carry it, these were the components and directions from God. And once they settled in the Promised Land, the Holy Temple was constructed. And if you think the Mishkan was fancy, it was nothing compared to the temple. Harriet didn't have to carry the Mishkan, nor did she build the temple, but in her mind, the sacred nature of both would not have bothered her. That was her heart and soul, the synagogue. Both Rodef Shalom in Philadelphia, which was the synagogue of her youth, and right here in Beth Emeth, with which she was affiliated from just about the day she and Jerry moved to Delaware. So much of her life was tied to these non-portable sanctuaries. Harriet was very involved in our religious education committee. As a matter of fact, there was one moment in my almost 54 years here when I was not happy with Harriet, and while it never impacted our relationship, obviously, I never forgot it. The 3 congregations in town were planning a senior high school program for our students. A committee was formed, and educators of the committee spent a day a week for an entire year working on details, particularly the curriculum. Trust me, it wasn't easy, but we presented a plan which first the committees of the congregation had to approve, and then it would go to their boards. It never got out of our own committee. One person said, "We have a new young rabbi. Why should we leave our kids to join with the other students?" And with that, the committee voted to not present it to our board. The project was over. 1 year wasted, and I was absolutely convinced that they never wanted this to move forward in the first place. That person? Harriet Ansul. But after a while, I realized that she had complimented me and put her trust in me. She was a dear friend. Her 90th birthday celebration was so joyous, so filled with the love and respect her family and friends felt for her. I will miss Harriet Ansul. No, sorry. I will miss Harriet B. Ansul. Never forget that B. Her heart was filled with the gold of the 2 sanctuaries, her soul with the divine presence found in them both. Zichrona livracha. May her memory be a blessing, as rich as were the days that she lived and loved among us. My turn. As we have already heard from my esteemed colleagues and from Sion, this week we read from the final chapters of the book of Exodus, the Torah portion where the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary in the wilderness, is finally built. It's striking to notice that the 3 previous Torah portions are devoted almost entirely to describing the Mishkan in extraordinary detail. How it should be designed, how it should be assembled, every measurement, every material, every thread and beam that would be required. But this week, something changes. This week, the plans finally become action. The Mishkan is built. And the first act of the people is not construction, it's generosity. The Israelites begin bringing their gifts: gold, silver, copper, cloth, precious stones, everything needed to build the sanctuary. They bring so much and they give so generously that eventually Moses must tell them to stop. There is more than enough. What a remarkable moment in our tradition. A community so moved to give that they must be told they have given enough. And what a beautiful Torah portion to read in the week that we say goodbye to Harriet. Because Harriet understood something so deeply important, that sacred spaces, whether they are sanctuaries, communities, or families, are not built only with plans. They are built with generosity. They are built with people who give of themselves. And Harriet was exactly that kind of person. She gave her time. She gave her energy. She gave her meticulous care and attention. She gave her presence. And through that generosity, she helped build something sacred, a life filled with family, friendship, community, and love. We gather today to remember Harriet, beloved mother, grandmother, and family matriarch, and to her grandchildren, simply and lovingly known as Grams. As I listened to her family speak about her, the same words came up again and again. Harriet was warm, supportive, and deeply present. She did not simply love her family, she delighted in them. Matan remarked that there was no one better to share good news with because Harriet would often be more excited than the person sharing it. That joy was one of her great gifts. Her grandchildren, Matan, Leora, and Eliana, knew that joy well. Harriet had a way of making each of them feel uniquely cherished, as we already heard, her favorite grandson, her favorite oldest granddaughter, and her favorite youngest granddaughter. Somehow, each one knew that they had a special place in her heart. And she showed up for them. She showed up for preschool graduations and dance recitals, for choir concerts and school performances, for college graduation, for camp visiting days, for holidays and family gatherings. Sometimes, Leora told me, she would simply drive to the University of Delaware to take her and her friends out to dinner because surely they must be tired of the dining hall food. Again and again, the family returned to the same truth. Harriet was present. She was present not only for the milestones, but for the everyday moments too. And that kind of presence is its own kind of love. It tells the people around you, I'm here, I care, your life matters to me. Harriet also created warmth in the world around her. She loved beauty. She was always put together, as we know. She noticed details. She cared about how a table was set and how the flowers were arranged, how everything was done. And there was often, as her family knew well, a Harriet way of doing things. Food was one of those ways she loved people, her brisket and her brown-edged cookies, her peach cake and her lemon meringue pie. These are family legends. Camp friends, as we already heard, knew where to go on visiting day to make sure they got some of Gran's cookies. And Thanksgiving meant gathering at 17 Stonecrop for her famous noodle stuffing and mushroom gravy that no one has ever quite managed to recreate. Because Harriet's cooking was never just about food, it was about bringing people together. And for many people in this family, home meant 17 Stonecrop Road, where Harriet and her beloved husband, Jerry, Pop, built a house filled with warmth, hospitality, celebrations, and love. Harriet herself came from a deeply connected Philadelphian family. She was, in her heart, always a Philadelphia girl. She grew up in West Philadelphia, surrounded by relatives, and she shared an especially close bond with her sister, Joy, a relationship that remained important throughout her life. Her Jewish identity was also shaped early in life through her family's deep connection to Congregation Rodef Shalom, where synagogue life and Jewish community were central parts of her upbringing. Later, when Harriet and Jerry settled in Wilmington, she brought that same devotion with her to Congregation Beth Emeth, where she became a deeply committed member of the community for decades. She volunteered widely within the congregation, serving, as we've already heard, on the Education Committee, in the Ritual and Choir Committee, among many others. She cared deeply about the quality of synagogue life, about worship, about music, about learning, and about helping sustain the Jewish community that she loved. She had an extraordinary memory. When Harriet told a story, it frequently began with the exact address where it happened, street name and number included. She remembered people, conversations, and details from decades earlier. As a young woman, she was polished, social, and ambitious. She had an ease with people and a warmth that drew others in. And then came Jerry. Together, they built a marriage that lasted 55 years and became the foundation for the life they created together, raising their children, Sue, Steve, and Mike, and welcoming, of course, Sue's husband, Sion, who over the years became deeply close with Harriet and shared with her a warm and meaningful bond. Together, they built a family that continued to grow with the arrival of the grandchildren. Harriet and Jerry loved Broadway. They loved the Philadelphia Orchestra. They loved traveling the world. They did not simply pass through the world, they engaged it, and they learned from it, and they brought that richness back into their home and to their family. Harriet remained curious and engaged throughout her life. Even into her 90s, she was taking classes through OSHER, the University of Delaware's lifelong learning program. She loved current events, and she read her newspapers carefully, the actual paper stacked behind her chair. You know, it has ink, it's a physical copy. She wouldn't have the online ones, apparently. She needed the physical newspaper. She also cared deeply about improving the world around her. Harriet supported causes she believed in strongly, including Planned Parenthood, and she devoted more than 25 years of volunteer service to Nemours Children's Hospital. There she helped organize volunteers, she read to children, and she pushed the coffee cart through the hospital halls, bringing comfort to families facing long and difficult days. She believed in showing up for people who needed kindness. Harriet was strong, very strong. She exercised faithfully, worked with her trainer for many years, took pride in staying active. She was disciplined, independent, and determined. And yes, she could be stubborn. Harriet knew what she thought and what she wanted. Sometimes she made decisions first and informed the family afterward. At one point, she even bought herself a car without telling anyone beforehand, because of course she did. That was Harriet. Above all, Harriet was immensely proud of her family. She celebrated the accomplishments of her children and took great joy in the lives of her grandchildren. If the building of the Mishkan teaches us that sacred spaces are built when people bring their gifts to the community, then Harriet spent her life bringing her own gifts, her generosity, her energy, and her care to help build such sacred spaces. She built them in her home, in her synagogue, in her community, and most of all within her family. Those spaces remain. They remain in the traditions she helped create, in the stories that will continue to be told, in the values she modeled, in the lives of the people who loved her. And so today we remember Harriet Grams. We give thanks for the sanctuary of love and family she helped build. Zichronan livracha. May her memory be for blessing. Amen. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. And life is a journey from childhood to maturity, from youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the stage, the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. We rise as we are able for the recitation of El Male Rachamim. El Male Rachamim, Shachen Bamromim, Hamse Minucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShchina, Im Kirushim Utorim, Ki Zohar Akiya, Mazhirim, En Nishmat Harriet Bat Meir Yosef Ve'elka, Shehalcha Le'olama, Baal harachamim, yastireha b'seter k'nafal yolemim. ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר Amen. God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one who has gone into eternity find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold her close to you forever, so that her soul may be bound up in the life and the bond of life eternal. May she find a home with you, and may she rest in peace. Together we say, Amen. We may be seated.